Don Mazzella here again for Small Business Digest. We have today with us Leon Goren. He's President and Chief Executive Officer of PEO Leadership. We're going to talk about we're coming out of this pandemic, and leadership is going to be key. And how does a small business leader really get to know his or her job? Leon, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Don. It's a pleasure to be here chatting with you.
Well, as I indicated in our talk, first, Leon, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, then a little bit about your company, and finally a website.
Absolutely. So, where do I begin? My life, if I really go back, I'm born in Canada. I was born in Montreal. Very much an entrepreneur. So hopefully be able to share some relevant stories with a lot of your audience here. And as I sort of grew as an entrepreneur, started working when I was 13, 14, delivering newspapers. Later on in life, funny enough, I became a CPA. So worked in Boston in the office for a few years for Deloitte. But ultimately the entrepreneurialism came back and grabbed me. And I was one of the early startups in 1997, starting a company with justwhiteshirts.com. It was one of the very early startups in the .com space, and did that for a number of years. And while I was doing that, I do a number of speaking engagements, and someone grabbed me and said, hey, Leon, would you be interested in participating in a peer advisory group? And so I sat down with the individual, I chatted with him and jumped on board. And that was a company called PEO Leadership. Back then it was called Presidents of Enterprising Organizations. And I haven't looked back since. I've been at it for more than 15 years doing that, no longer as a participant, but now running the organization and the community. So that's a little bit of personal background on myself. I have 3 kids. I'm married to a fantastic wife named Michelle. We've been married for quite a while. My 3 kids are in college, and life is really good. We're very lucky to be where we are. You wanted some information on the company. So PEO Leadership is really, the essence of what we do is we're helping experienced business leaders realize their personal, professional, and organization growth objectives. And we use the word experience, but even in our smaller businesses, there are absolutely a number of experienced entrepreneurs. Those have left multinational organizations that sort of went in and started businesses on their own. Those that have been working in small businesses for a number of years and have sort of actually built the business. Most of our leaders in our community are on the smaller side, or the smallest side, anywhere from 2 to 3 million, but we really ramp it up to well over $1 billion on revenue with some of the leaders that participate. But the essence, that's our essence, and our methodology of delivering that is really threefold. It's a 3-legged stool, I always say. The first leg is to match the participant up with an advisor, what we call them as an executive advisor. So a leader that has both business acumen, but also has the patience and willingness to sort of coach along these individuals and bring them along their journey in terms of what they define as success. And that first leg of the stool, the first piece of it, is actually laying out what success looks like. So Donna, if you and I were sitting here today, I'd be trying to match it up to your year end. But let's say it was April 30th, 2022 today. I'd be asking you questions around, what does success look like in your business? And you tell me the numbers in 2 seconds, and then our conversation would carry on around how are we going to actually hit those numbers. So that's the advisor's role. Many have come from big, large organizations. They're unbelievable people. They don't do it for the money. They really do it for a give back and trying to make a difference for these individuals. The second leg is that advisory board that individuals will come together. All our members are part of an advisory board that is actually chaired by that executive advisor. And the door closes once a month. They sit down. Everybody's on an NDA. And the idea is, how can we learn from each other around the table? Share some of the challenges, opportunities that we're faced. How can we learn more about each other? Not just from an organizational perspective, but also a personal perspective too, because the reality is they go hand in hand. If you're going through a divorce, I can guarantee you your business is going south. So that advisory board is a big piece. And then the third leg of the stool is the entire community. So if you can create a giving community where people are willing to help each other. So if I have a member in one of our smaller business groups looking at expanding in a particular region, pick Minneapolis, for example, do I have other members that have actually successfully done that? And could they sit down with them, grab a coffee and really learn from their experience so they don't make the same mistakes? So leveraging the community is a big thing. And so that combination of three pillars or three legs of a stool really helps us ensure that we not just meet the members' expectations, but try and exceed them. And what that means is that they're actually realizing those goals and objectives. So that's a little bit of background. Myself, I obviously very high level on what we do, but should give you a sense, or your audience a sense of it.
And your website?
PEO-leadership.com. And it's a wealth of information for those that are looking for information. Certainly we got testimonials and stuff, but given the last year and all the changes that have been happening, we've been posting a lot of different things, including, I'm very proud to be on your podcast here, but I also run a podcast with thought leaders from around the world once a month, where I'm interviewing the likes of Janice Stein, Professor Cantor out of Harvard, Jason Salk out of St. Louis, just some great people as well.
That's good. So now let's talk. We're coming out of the pandemic, and if you look at the economists, they're all pointing that the world is going to be a heck of a lot better. If that's the case, what should small business leaders be doing today, in your view, in order to prepare for this coming expansion?
Well, I'm actually hoping a lot in your audience, a lot of those individuals today have actually started the preparation, because we're not just coming out of this, we're actually roaring into it right now. And the US economy is booming. The Canadian economy is starting to boom as well. And we know this because you can read the papers every day, and supply chains are just locked up in grid. The demand is excessive, and we actually can't get the supply on a lot of our products. So why is that important? It's really important to small businesses and to larger businesses today to think about one, you got to think big, but two is, one of the primary things of successful leaders is to really think about, where are we going to be in the next year or two? So what does this world look like to us? Because to be able to do that, and you're not going to be 100% accurate, but at least it gives you a planning tool, something to think about within respect of your own business and how you position your business into the rest of the economy. So let's assume 6 months from today, the economy is still roaring back. Then the question then becomes, what these leaders need to think about is, how does my product or service start to fit within the mold of the demand of my consumers today? And will my supply chains be able to fulfill it? Two is, do I have the team in place to actually deliver this stuff? You have a lot of companies coming out of a period where a lot of them went through major layoffs. Right? They let go of staff. Some companies went down to zero. Some companies went down to 25% of revenue. Not all. There were some companies that just boomed during this time. But now we're in recovery mode, right? So how do I start? I can't just jump into a period where, okay, I got products in my inventory. I got people for logistics, distribution to be able to deal with it. It's not just going to happen overnight. So you need to start thinking about that today. And you need to start thinking about, what type of talent will I need around the table? What's my vision, mission going to look like? And how am I strategically going to get there?
Keep on going. So that's what I like about this one. The guest usually takes care of most of the half hour.
All right. So I think about two things. We want to talk about the leadership here. There's two things every leader is responsible for. Okay. Number one is the future. We talked about that, right? I don't care whether you have 2 employees or whether you have 100 employees or you got 10,000 employees. Your responsibility is to predict and understand where are we going, because there's all those people that are depending on you. If you pick wrong or you don't actually do it, you're not going to have a business down the road. So that's number one. So, the question then around number one is, how do you do that? I mean, especially when COVID, you were locked in your house. Most of us just watch TV and media around COVID stuff and numbers popping up everywhere. But actually, how do you fully understand and comprehend what the future may hold? So absolutely, yes, you got to be reading. You got to be listening to media. The question is, there's so much media out there. You need to be selective about what you're looking at and what you're reading about. And so you need to concentrate about things that may be related to your business, not just the general crap that's being publicized out there. So that's number one. Number two, what else can you do about it? You need to build a web of relationships. You need to build peers that are not inside your business, but potentially outside of your business in different industries. Why? Because they're great indicators for you in terms of where things are going. And that's one of the reasons advisory boards work really well, whether it's in our case, which is a shared advisory board, it's your own personal advisory board, but it's shared among the leaders around the table. Or if you set up your own advisory board fully dedicated to your business. The idea is you want it diversified. You want people who have experience in different industries who can sit down with you, challenge your thinking, but also as you're helping them, you actually get an idea of what's going on there. So great example, trucking industry, logistics. If you're sitting in a meeting and you have a logistics company in your business or across the table from you, and they're telling you the flatbeds are sitting still in the parking lots, that's a bit of an indicator to you that, hey, we got something going on here around deliveries, maybe consumer demand. When you have another member returning from Asia coming back and saying, I remember in 2008 coming back and saying, it's very funny this year. I was in there on our visit to the factories, and a couple of factories had chains on their doors, and the doors were closed. And in 2008, it was interesting. The economy was booming, and I could tell you around the table, everybody had more purchase orders than they could do, that they could handle. Nobody could foresee anything. And here was a piece of information that sort of gave you a hint of potentially what was coming. So number one, we talked. Number two, the advisory board, seeking a peer of networks. I know it's difficult. COVID's been hard. Many people in different parts of the country have been locked down. You've gone a year without building relationships and networks. You need to turn it back on. So that all goes through my first thing, and that's about thinking about the future. The second piece that I always push leaders on is the ability to engage and inspire their people. So again, certainly if you're starting up a business, it's you, maybe one other person. You're going to end up doing a whole bunch of things in that business to get it off the ground, to grow it. However, when you get to about 1 million, 500,000, 1 million, absolutely at 3 million, and you start assembling a team, I can tell you one of the biggest mistakes among leaders is they've gotten so used to micromanaging and running the entire business. They have this difficulty of actually starting to let go. And if you don't let go, you're not really engaging and inspiring the people that you've just hired to help you. So your role really is about, how am I going to lead the business, not necessarily run every aspect of the business now. And so every interaction that you'll have with an employee, a stakeholder, you really need to start thinking about, how did I leave that person thinking? When I walked away or I addressed them and we had a conversation, did I leave them engaged and inspired, or did I just leave them in a mood that they're just sitting there flipping their fingers and going, God, I can't wait to get out of here. It's been a brutal day. And it's, for some leaders, that's very difficult. Like, they actually need to make a conscious effort every time they're engaging with their people to think about that. And it is tough, because as leaders, we have good and bad days as well. And so during those bad days, it sometimes just comes naturally out of you, and it comes right onto your team. But hey, the responsibility of a leader is, you need to self-contain that. You can certainly be vulnerable, be some type of expressive, but you got to remember that. So you got to remember that your job is to inspire and engage your team. So it gives you
Leon,
this 1 and 2.
yeah. Leon, let me interrupt you for two things.
Yeah.
Identify Leon Goren, he's with PEO Leadership. Leon, your website again and how people can reach you?
The PEO, so Peter Elephant Octopus dash leadership.com. And on there is all the information, including being able to contact us. You can sign up for a newsletter. You can definitely register for any event that we have available to the community outside. Even one of the things we've done is not just within our own community, but through this past year, we've just opened it up to a much larger community and trying to give back and trying to help people through these times.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question. In today's comic section, which I read faithfully, is an exchange with on the Dagwood. Mr.
Yeah.
Dithers hasn't changed in 65 years. Dagwood said, "I think I deserve an appointment." You did, Dagwood. You're now office manager. What's after that? He said, "Former office manager." Well, but the point I'm getting at is the Mr. Dithers of this world, person after person coming on this program says is dead, yet they still seem to exist. And I'm listening to you. I just had to ask the question, how you feel about that, and how can you get help of Mr. Dithers not be who he is?
Okay. Yeah. In terms of changing possibly his view and behaviors and perspective, I think is what you're asking me, right?
Yes, because Mr. Dithers is constantly saying you're fired or you're not working hard enough, etc. All the things
Yeah.
that we don't see and we don't want to see in today's world.
Yeah. I would tell Mr. Shea, you're probably most likely, unless it's in a very unusual situation, you may not have a company in the next year. And the reason I'm going to tell him that or her that is, as the economy picks up today, yes, there were a lot of jobs that were let go, but I think the demand and we're already starting to see demand for talent is incredible right now. Like you pick a sector like IT, right? Today, IT individuals may get between 5 to 7 job offers. It's like, who would have thought? I would never have predicted that a year ago today. And so, depending on the business that they're in, as a leader, you need to retain your people. You need to engage them. I come back to how we're engaging them, right? And if you're not engaging them and the market is hot, where do you think your people are going? That's number one. Number two is the world has changed. And so, the way we used to run businesses, and many people did, was the dictator style, right? This is the way we're doing. This is, I put my fist down, and this is how we're going to run our business. Well, when you deal with the millennials, the younger individuals, and they're not so young anymore, they've been growing up as well. The world is not wired that way anymore. It is a collaborative effort for any company to succeed. It is not just the leader, it's a leadership team. And so, unfortunately, a lot of those individuals that are unable to change their behaviors in terms of leading these businesses are going to fail. And I would tell you the other thing is, when you typically run a business like that, you're not as open to actively listen, not just to your employees, but you're not actively listening to what's happening around you. And the world is changing very rapidly today. So if you're not actively listening, you're possibly becoming irrelevant. And it's pretty harsh, but that's the truth.
Well, you see, I don't know if you've been following about the movie and Broadway producer Reuben. He for the last 15 years, he ruled by fear. The only thing that kept him going was the fact that he was so good at what he did. But the point is, if a leader is not really good at what they do, if I'm hearing you right, you think that they're doomed.
I just think yeah, doomed. You're going to have a tiny minority that will be very successful, right? And you've seen that. You're right. Whether it's that movie individual or one of the top business leaders years ago. I mean, if you're a future thinker and you're developing stuff, you will have people that will follow you, right? Because they believe in what you're doing, but they have a massive, somebody called an MTP, a massive transformative purpose. So they are just driven by that, and they'll do whatever they can to get to that purpose. The people will follow if they also believe in that purpose. But trust me, there are very few people running with that type of purpose. They're exceptional individuals. And in many cases, a lot of them will have a right-hand individual to cover their weaknesses, which may be people management, right? So they'll sort of have them covering, but it's rare. That is the one exception. If you're extremely talented and you have a purpose that is not just your own purpose, but can be a vision and a mission for a large group of individuals who will believe in that as well, they'll overlook the negative pieces of how you're doing. But again, you're never going to be on your own doing that, right? There'll always be a competitor out there. So if you have somebody else who's doing that, and they're a much more engaging, inspiring leader, I can guarantee you those people are going to move. So it's short-lived at the end of the day.
Well, we're talking with Leon Goren. He's a fascinating speaker. And now we have about 7 minutes left. What do you want to talk about? I've been interrupting you.
Well, a couple more points I think I can give your audience around to think about that I've seen that are perhaps overlooked by small businesses trying to grow. And one is we're also focused on growth that we often lose sight of the numbers. And when I talk about numbers, I'm not even talking about historical financial statements. I'm talking about numbers around understanding what your cash flow position is like, and the cash flow position that will be like in the next month, the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen some great ideas, great companies get very excited about building out, and don't focus on the numbers, or they focus on historical numbers. And as you can imagine, the problem with looking at historical numbers, even if you're profitable, is that it's by the time those numbers get released, you're already 2 or 3 months into the new year, and they're not reflective of your cash flow. So I just a reminder to all those businesses, small, even mid-sized businesses, cash flow is really, really important. And it got reinforced with COVID. The first number of companies in the first few months when you had to go through a shutdown, didn't necessarily have the cash flow to actually survive. The government's kicked in a lot to help them during that period of time. But cash flow is probably the most important thing for a small business. And then the other thing that I will tell them is they need to spend a little time just self-reflecting and being self-critical. I find that a lot of the successful entrepreneurs, they're constantly pushing, but they're also very good, whether it be on a daily or weekly basis, sitting back, taking an hour and reflecting around what did they do that day? And is it aligned to my strategy or the company's strategy in terms of how they should be spending their time? And they'll rate themselves, a scale of 1 to 10. Well, I said I was supposed to do these 3 things. It was aligned to the strategy, and I did none of those 3. I'll give myself a 1. And what tends to happen is actually when you document that in front of you, whether it be on a weekly or daily basis, is that actually motivates you and starts to change your behaviors, which are very difficult to do. So that's just another little tool. And lastly, I would tell you, and obviously I'm very passionate about this, is that the power of an advisory board should definitely not be overlooked. And, whether you're going to participate in PEOleadership.com or you look at some other advisory boards, it gives you a leg up today in a world that is changing so quickly. And come back to being able to sit around the table with a diverse group of individuals. And when I say diverse, I mean, really, I'm talking about diverse. Men, women, different demographics, different ways of thinking. To shut the door, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to open up and share some of not just the wins, but some of the challenges that you're dealing with today is absolutely huge. We work in our groups around 4 C's: clarity, counsel, courage, and commitment. And so when we pose a challenge or an opportunity in front of our groups, one of the things I ask our leaders to say, what am I seeking here? Are you seeking clarity? Are you seeking counsel? Are you looking for some courage here? So we can address what they're presenting to us. And none of us in the group will ever understand that leader's business as well as they do. But we can certainly test the assumptions that they're making. We can challenge their thinking. We can relate it back to other elements that may be important to them. Their health, what they've told us is a priority. Their wealth, are they building value in their business? Are they preparing themselves for the future? Their family and relationships. I remember having an individual in one of our groups talk about family is critical. I need to spend more time with our family. And 3 months later, talking about moving to London. And we were sitting back, and whatever the office was going to be in London, we just brought up the fact that you just 3 months ago started talking about how important your family is, and you had to be in front of your family. You're leaving your family behind to spend the weeks in London now. How is that going to work? So you just want objective, unbiased people to push you a little bit where you can self-reflect and make sure you're making the best decisions.
Well, a quick point. Do you pay your advisory board, or how do you get people to be on an advisory board?
So the way in our business, we run it as a community. We're an organization. So leaders pay the organization. It's just over it's almost $16,000 a year they pay us. And what it entitles them to is there'll be minimum of 12 meetings a year. There'll be one-on-one coaching with their advisor, and they'll be able to participate in we run a massive annual conference every year. I had Simon Sinek, Seth Godin there, where I'll bring the whole community together with thought leaders from around the world, and we'll get to challenge each other in a larger community. So they pay us an annual fee. The individuals that are chairing or the advisors who run those advisory boards are compensated. So most of them, have had the ex-president of Pepsi, Charlene ran Honeywell. I have an ex-McKinsey person, extremely successful individuals who are not running these groups for the amount of money I pay them. They're running the groups because they want to give back. They like they like to be able to influence and challenge these individuals. So it is a business model. I'm not a not-for-profit organization. We're accountable to our members. Our job is, how do I get you from A to B? You're going to run, you're going to walk. We'll try and walk beside you. We'll try and accelerate you there. When you get thrown a curveball and you get off the path, how am I going to compress it? So again, we're running in a straight line. You can change those goals and objectives at any time, but we're going to have a conversation about it. And that's how we run our business.
Leon, well, unfortunately, we've come almost to the close of our time together. What last thought would you like to leave our audience?
I would tell them, think big, act small, and show some resilience. We're through this. I believe you're going to see a new world in a few more months. We're already experiencing a new world. You've made it this far. Don't give up. We're in the last miles of the marathon here.
Well, on that note, we'll say thank you, Leon, for being with us. It was very illuminating. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, for letting me be with you. That was great.